So where's Grantable today? I mean, we've talked a lot about how you got to where you are. Tell us about the product and what you have going on.
Yeah, so we're at a really exciting phase. We're, I guess, about a month out from we launched the ability for grant experts. So most people think of grant writers. They can now create profiles on Grantable that look really great, and they're unique in that they feature the information that we actually need to get across in our sector. So your subject matter expertise, you can tag yourself with, you know, I've done a lot of arts grants, or I've done legal aid or food security. So that's really important for the experts and their clients to know what you specialize in. You can create a portfolio of the actual grants you worked on, because again, if you can hire somebody who's already worked on the grant before, that I can't tell you how valuable that is, to have that inside track on how to save time, how to write the grant well, and then the specific services as well. So some people will help you find grants. Some people don't want to do that. So just making it much easier for these folks to communicate what they do and how much they charge. So the profiles are live. We're reaching out in a very manual way in these early days, very hands-on, trying to talk to everybody that's signing up. So I think we have about 35 grant experts signed up, and we're trying to focus on Washington State, where I used to live and have a strong network, and then here in the Virginia area as well. But we're actually seeing signups from other places as well, even internationally. We've gotten some folks signed up from Canada and Mexico, which is really cool. So early days, we're going to go at this for a few more weeks just to build a critical mass of the service providers, or sort of the supply side of our market. And then we've got sort of a similar but more scaled up approach on the client side. So these would be nonprofits or businesses likely that will need grant support. So we'll kind of do a similar playbook. I've got a bunch of personal contacts that I will reach out to personally and say, hey, check out all of these awesome experts that you can easily filter down and message. And we're building out the communications to really mimic some of the other really well-designed marketplaces like Airbnb. So the messaging should be super slick and very, very, very seamless for people to get in touch and start figuring out if they want to work together. So that'll launch. We should have messaging done within the next couple of days. We'll just test that. And then, our plan is around the end of the month, we'll open up and connect both sides and kind of see what starts to happen. So it's a super exciting time. And the grant experts we've gotten in touch with are just really cool people. They are willing to talk to us. They are sharing insights. We're learning about different regulations around the country that we need to be mindful of. And then on the nonprofit side too, that's where we're starting. We're focusing on nonprofits to kind of as our first client side market, expanding into businesses. But again, you're talking to people who are just really open, working on very inspiring projects in communities that it's always interesting to learn about. So that's just a bonus. Like the people that are our customers, that are our users, are of great interest to me. That's the community that I've come from my career. So it's just awesome to learn about what they're doing. So that's kind of the phase that we're in.
And it's an $800 billion industry that you're talking about. So
Yeah.
when you launch, I mean, so is there a certain part of the nonprofit area that you're going after? Is it going to be larger federal grants, or what's your
Well,
focus?
so to be clear, it's a lot of people think of nonprofits when they think of grants, but the number you just cited, about $80 billion a year, comes from private grant makers. So think of foundation grant makers. Um,
Hmm.
720 billion is public grant funding, so federal government down through states and municipalities. It's an enormous amount. $800 billion goes out in the form of grants every year in just the US. And what we're talking about there, we've estimated there are probably about 30 million grant applications. I'm about to write one for Grantable, but about 30 million applications are produced every year to apply for that $800 billion. And applications take anywhere from 5 to 200 hours to complete based on, how complex it is. So you're talking, if you conservatively estimate, 20 hours per application, you're talking about 600 million hours of labor to move that $800 billion from point A to point B every year. So about 300,000 man years or person years to get that money from A to B. So
I'm curious.
That's
Yeah, I mean,
around.
as I'm sitting here thinking, one thing that popped in my head is college scholarship money. Is that considered a grant, or and
Some of
if
them.
yes, if no, is that something that you would consider going after? Because it's some crazy stat out there that millions and millions of dollars goes unused from a college scholarship standpoint.
I mean, conceptually, those are grants. You're applying for them. You're making your case. You're either awarded or not. I think maybe there are some sort of ethical angles to consider if it's a one-time grant really to support an individual's education. You might be able to kind of think about it like, well, maybe this person really should represent themselves. Kind of like maybe you wouldn't necessarily want somebody to apply for a job for you because you really want to understand, are you a good fit? But it's these grants that are year in, year out, repetitive. It's for the same program.
Got it.
That's where I think a lot of time can be given back to business leaders, nonprofit leaders. Once you've written a few grants and you've gotten down what you're trying to communicate, you've created your budget, like there are other responsibilities that these folks really have. And can we create a place, a platform online where they can handle their grant seeking in a much more efficient way? Can we take that 600 million hours and start shrinking that? Can we allocate that to a gig economy and a legion of different individuals out there who specialize in particular kinds of grant seeking? Can we just be more efficient about moving all that money from where it begins to the innovation and the justice initiatives that it needs to fund? So can it take less labor to move that from point A to point B? And we believe we can do that in this phase through connectivity, but in future phases, we think that there is technology. We think we can leverage AI and natural language recognition to actually help make that even more efficient to get that funding where it needs to go.
These are going to be, I don't have like a fact checker in front of me, so these are just things that I'm going to say from over time. But I believe I heard that like a lot of nonprofits, 90% of nonprofits money goes towards their staff, which doesn't necessarily mean towards the thing that they're trying to do. Now, granted, with that staff might be trying to fix those things, so that stat could be taken out of context. But I wonder how much of that staff is then recycling every year to try to bring in some of that those grant dollars in there. So that was one of the first things that came to mind. I don't know if you've heard a stat like that, but
yeah, that would be a really high number just based on my experience working with different clients. They're generally not spending that much on personnel, and they're actually evaluated a lot of times by how low they can keep their administrative cost and how much they can dedicate to programming. What I'll say, I think, is an unfair characterization or almost a stereotype of nonprofits is that they just don't know what they're doing and they're so inefficient. When in fact, the reality is that nonprofits, unlike private sector businesses, are essentially having to run two organizations in one with one set of resources and personnel, where a business can just operate and its revenue is directly linked to everything in its operation. Nonprofits have this really challenging scenario where the way they make money is entirely decoupled from the service they provide. So they have to run a money-making operation while running a service provision operation. Nobody is going to pay you for, operating your food bank. The people that come in for the food are not paying for the food.
Yeah.
So you have to go out and run this whole thing to justify your work, which is an enormous just amount of work in and of itself. So nonprofits, have this reputation of being understaffed, under-resourced. It's because the way that we as a society have decided that this work is going to get done, it's going to get done by nonprofits who have this additional layer of burden where you have to run essentially a grocery store, and then you have to run nonstop fundraising campaigns, grant seeking, gala events. You got to go and get all these things for an auction, like just to get money to pay for your grocery store. So a regular grocery store just takes your money for a can of soup, and it's all factored in and it runs smooth. So people wonder, why can't this food bank just get its act together? Well, it's because the people are getting food for free, and then the staff are out there year in, year out trying.
We lost your audio, Philip.
Is it back?
There you go.
Okay. Sorry. Hopefully most of that came through. But anyway, just a soapbox for nonprofits.
What's interesting is I have heard something like that as well. And a lot of nonprofits, specifically nonprofits in this, and I don't know if this is a Southeastern Virginia problem or just all across America, but a lot of these nonprofits that start will get their first grant, but it's very difficult for them to get that second round in there. Is that just because they're working on the business and can't actually get the grant out there, and does something like Grantable help that? Like, where do you see, is that a true story in there? Like
the statistics I've read are actually in reverse. The first grant is so hard because you don't necessarily have a track record to run on. After that, getting another grant is statistically from the studies I've seen more likely.
I'm getting a lot of weird news.
So it's not easy, but I think if that getting started, like for for-profits, that first your lead investor can be a big challenge. I think a similar type of psychology is happening in the nonprofit space. But I think to your point as well, in the early phases of grant seeking, you're kind of trying to get your first. If you're sort of a middle applicant where you've gotten a few grants, what you're trying to do is diversify where your grants are coming from. And if you're a really mature organization, what you're trying to do is increase the amounts of the grants you're going after, or even reach sort of national level funders. So the big ones that are giving, multi-million-dollar awards, and you're sort of implementing, maybe across state lines or in larger geographies or larger scopes of work. And so in some ways it's similar to the private sector.
Interesting. In terms of, as you bring on the subject matter experts with the grant process, and you build out your marketplace, do you have some sort of evaluation piece in there to make sure that there is some sort of accuracy or level of expertise that the people that use your service could rate those subject matter experts on?
Yeah, so there will be a review feature, similar to a lot of, every marketplace I can think of has review features that are really, really important. I think where we need to focus our thinking is how do we create the right categories and system for ratings and feedback that is helpful to our sector. So I just wrote a blog post about win rates. And every grant writer has been asked, and we all kind of roll our eyes because it's not a very good metric for the quality of the writer. The expert should be helping you produce better grants, more grants. They should be helping you get organized. They should be helping you think more strategically. But as I just went over with Zack, if a grant writer works with you, an early stage nonprofit, for example, and you get rejected 9 times in a row, but that 10th one is your first grant and they've stuck with you and helped you reach that milestone to get you going, get the ball rolling, they should not be dinged for having a 10% success rate. They should be celebrated for keeping your spirits up and sticking with you through all that. Whereas if you're, a huge, if you're the, United Way or something, and you get a grant that they've gotten for the last 10 years running and they didn't really change it, it was a foregone conclusion, but you got 100% success rate, that's not a very meaningful stat. So we just want to make sure that
it's almost a vanity metric.
Yeah,
100%. It is. It's a bit of a vanity metric. Yeah, but there are meaningful ways to evaluate, and then there are certifications too. There's a lot of content and curriculum out there about how to be an effective grant professional. So we're paying a lot of attention to that. We're in talks with the Puget Sound Grant Writers Association out in the near Seattle, Washington, where I used to live and have a lot of relationships. So we're learning a lot from. They're one of the oldest grant writers associations in the country, and so they really know their stuff in terms of the ethics of the profession, best practices, like all kinds of tips and tricks. And then they've got some really wonderful, really experienced individuals as members and as their board leadership. So we're really trying to come at this, not like we have all the answers, but there is really, really good knowledge out there that we want to base our company upon as well.
I'm curious also from if you received any feedback from the reviewer side. So like if people that use Grantable, is there less errors or less back and forths that need to take place? So then you're saving the reviewers a lot of time and money as well. Have you received any feedback on that?
Yeah, and somebody said to me, if you've met one private foundation, then you've met one private foundation. So they really do have their own personalities and their own perspectives. And so we've heard exactly as you said, some folks are like, wow, yeah, this would be a much better way to not only reduce the number of ill-fitting applications that we receive, but also improve application quality. So some people see the optimistic side of this, which I think is important, because the grant makers, the grantors, if they put out an opportunity and they get 200 submissions, but 150 of them are not really what they're looking for, that's a lot of wasted time and effort. So an intermediary can really help as a screening mechanism. But then we've also heard some people that say, well, we really want to hear the applicant in their own voice. And, that can come from a number of angles. Some people, if they really genuinely value the applicant's voice and are, open to different styles of writing, different ways of conveying information, I think that can be really great. But there is definitely a documented trend where if people write in a way, create their proposals in a way that doesn't conform to maybe a traditional or sort of a voice that centers sort of the white community in this country, that they can be dinged for that, writing differently, communicating differently. And so if it's coming from that kind of place, then I think that's problematic. And so we want to definitely push back and kind of say, in some way, we need to, make sure the playing field is level. Either anybody can hire an expert to come in and help you format this the way that you want, or you got to accept how people communicate natively in their own way and do your part to understand what they're saying and see the work they're doing. So it's an interesting challenge to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, I almost really see that as the grantor could be almost a third leg in your in a marketplace stool, in the sense of, if I was a grantor and I knew that I was going to get quality applications with zero errors and not have to sift through 75% error rate, then I would want to leverage your platform and your marketplace to make sure that I got quality submissions.
Well, I mean, that's a very salient observation of yours. That's our plan. I mean, we see this as a two-sided marketplace now. And our plan here is that we are trying to optimize the sector for all three groups. We understand, and they understand, that they're all related, and the more efficiently they can collaborate, everybody's mission deepens its impact, whether you're the grantor or the grantee. So right now, what we're trying to do, though, is to build software and technology around the grantee's experience. Yeah. There's a lot of software out there built for the grantors because they have the money to pay for it. And so unfortunately, what happens is you have a million different portals and platforms now for different grantors. That means the grantees have to learn 20 different, software platforms as they're going through the year. So we're really trying to kind of push back against that trend.
Sure. And I don't know what the fraud standpoint is, but I mean, if you were also perform the service of ensuring authenticity, that that these funds are going to the right grantee from the grantor, that's also another added bonus as well.
That's the vision that we have, actually, is that we want to move from an application-based system to an invitation-based system in the future. So if the grantors had enough information from Grantable where they could see the landscape and understand who is already a really likely fit and a likely good recipient of their particular funds, we would rather see them inviting groups into conversation with them. So rather than putting out, sort of an opportunity and getting 200 in the door of whom you're really interested in 20, inviting 30 in the door, knowing that those 20 are, much more likely to receive funding from you. That's what the largest private foundation in the world, the Gates Foundation, they have the resources to be able to scan the world for different groups doing work, and then you get invited to apply. You don't just, there's not open applications there. So our dream here is that any grantor, regardless of size, would have sort of the same opportunity as Gates to see the landscape that they're interested in supporting, and to be able to reach out to groups and say, hey, you seem to be doing amazing work that aligns with what we're trying to fund. Would you be interested in talking with us? We'd be interested in potentially funding you. And that's a very different reality that I think everybody in that three-sided market that you talked about, Tim, would be interested in reaching. So that's our big mission in our minds when we see, years out where we want to go. That's what guides us.
Someone who's been directly involved within the startup community for almost a decade, I want to talk to you about a serious pain point: spending a ton of time trying to understand the business landscape in the 757. That's time that should be focused on growing the business. At Startwheel, we're here to help you by compiling all of the news you need to know about in one place. Now there's no need to search multiple websites. Just head to startwheel.org and see for yourself. That's startwheel.org.